Welcome to another episode of the Steeple Report, and we have a special guest, as you've seen from the intro. Bazzel Baz is here with us and will be giving us a lot of insights into the unfortunate world of human trafficking and all the things that go on around that. So welcome, Bazzel.
Hey, Richard, thanks. It's good to be here today.
I appreciate you coming. It's as we talked about beforehand, and as you saw in a previous video, I touched on a lot of this human trafficking from a local point of view with the director of the Samaritan House, and when the opportunity came for you to join us, I leapt at the chance because your knowledge and your experience, both domestically and internationally, is I would think unparalleled. So I'm very appreciative of you making the time for us.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. Anywhere I can serve you in your show and help with the challenge we have out there with child trafficking, I'm certainly willing to do it.
Well, I appreciate that, and I just hope that, as I said to my previous guest, if one person is affected by seeing my little YouTube show and it helps one person get rescued or avoid a circumstance that would allow them to be kidnapped or trafficked in some way, then it's beyond my possible dreams. So that's the hope I hold out. So if you could, why don't you give us a little background about how you grew up and then maybe some of the military and CIA background, and then we'll dig into ARC.
Sure. Thank you, Richard. I come from a pretty good lineage. My grandfather came here in 1914 from Beirut, Lebanon. My grandmother was already here in the United States. She had some Native American roots. They ended up in Georgetown, South Carolina, and back in those days, everybody carried a gun and, saluted the flag and were really solid patriots when they came here to America. He had 12 kids. One of those was my father. My father met my mom down in South Carolina as well. They got married, and we became a military family. My father was a Special Forces Green Beret, among many different parts of the armed services, and almost all of my uncles served in the military. My grandfather, in fact, had served in the underground out of Beirut when the Ottoman Empire had attacked during that area. So I guess I have a pretty good history of war fighters in the family. My parents, we had two, my sister and myself. My sister, my mom and dad are everything that's good on this earth. And I've got great relatives. I ended up going to a school called the Citadel. And from there, I joined the Marine Corps. And out of the Marine Corps, I was recruited by the CIA. And after the CIA, I started a nonprofit called the Association for the Recovery of Children. And I think everything that I learned pretty much in the clandestine service has allowed us to be very successful in our operations and in our training and pretty much tackling what is insurmountable odds out there now when it comes to child trafficking here in the United States and abroad.
I'm trying to keep this as targeted as possible, but in some of the things that you did both in the military and the CIA, I'm sure you learned, to use the movie catchphrase, a lot of specialized skills that probably are not found other than with the elite operators, that you're able to do things that standard law enforcement, either through their own restrictions, legal and otherwise, you're probably able to, get in where others can't and be more effective as a result, I would assume. Is that the case?
I think that's fair to say. You know, I came out as a counterterrorism officer for the Marine Corps, and then I was in special operations in the CIA. I was ground branch and maritime. And for those in the community, they know where that is and what it is. I think that one of the great things about being in the special operations culture is that they run you through as much training as possible so that you can get in and out quickly, particularly in the clandestine service. As you're probably aware, it's not always a shoot 'em up kind of scenario. You know, undercover as a paramilitary case officer, you've got to be in a country, and you're most of the time you're not carrying a weapon with you. It wouldn't make sense. It would blow. It wouldn't be. It wouldn't match your cover story, so to speak. And so you learn to use a lot of tradecraft, whereby you're able to operate in plain sight, or in other words, while people are watching, you're still performing the deed, so to speak. And that, I think that's the mark of a really good spy or a good operator, to some degree, out of the CIA, and that you're able to actually be working and nobody thinks you're working. When it comes to other hard skills that maybe tier one operators get that are downrange, those apply also. I think situational awareness is probably one of the greatest things that we gather out there. As much as I'd like to say, the fact that you can shoot on target, that's a great thing in certain situations. But for ourselves, when we're rescuing children, most of the time we're not carrying a weapon in place. If we're in some oddball country trying to get an American out, that maybe it's Syria, and there's a threat of ISIS or terrorists, that might be another situation. But here in the United States, generally speaking, we're not armed. So that requires us to apply a lot of tradecraft that we learned from those previous organizations, and they have served us well. In addition to that, as a nonprofit, I'm not restrained by bureaucracy, meaning if I need a piece of technology that will allow me to go behind the veil to locate a kid or a perpetrator, I don't have to go up the chain of command. I don't have to wonder what the budget is, so to speak. Well, that's not true. I do have to worry what the budget is because everything costs.
Right.
But I don't have to worry about getting approvals from the government in order to go get the job done. And a lot of my friends who work FBI, CIA, or NSA, or whatever it may be, even law enforcement, it is what frustrates them most is all the red tape and all whatever hoops they have to jump through just to accomplish a mission, so to speak. And we don't have to deal with that. So it does allow us to do things a little bit faster and more efficient, I think.
I think, so many people in America hear the word human trafficking, and I'm not sure that everybody has all that great of an idea what that means. I think they often think of it as people from foreign lands coming here or coming to other Western countries, but there are a lot of scenarios where American children are kidnapped or sold or what have you, and they either stay domestically or they oftentimes find themselves overseas. I remember in a previous interview you did that, one of the things that you focused on was the idea that oftentimes God shows up when you feel like your options have run out. And it's just amazing to me some of the stories that I have heard, because I've watched a few different interviews of yours. And when you have gone overseas, how do the children typically get there? Is it typically a parent, or is it typically some kind of organization, gang, cartel, or is it is it organized or disorganized? I guess is the best question.
Yeah, well, let me start by saying this, and just to kind of jump on what you said about trafficking. Yeah, the word trafficking is becoming so used these days that people don't really understand what it really is. And when it comes to child trafficking, this is a better definition. It is basically paid child rape. That's it. Someone pays money and says, let me rape this little kid that's under 18. Okay. So that's what it really is. And that rape will include drugs. It will include torture. It will include starvation. It will include some of the worst case scenarios that you can even think of. In fact, so much to the point that when we have staff meetings, oftentimes some of our operators will say, man, you know what? Animals don't even do this to other animals, what humans do to other humans. So that's what it really is. And yes, we have a problem here in the United States. It's not just happening over there. The business model of human trafficking, whether that's labor or sex or children for pornography or whatever it may be, has turned into a very sophisticated business model. And it makes a lot of money, millions and millions and millions of dollars. In 2019, we had, I believe, 421,000 missing kids in America. So that's missing. So they could be runaways, they could be trafficked, they could be whatever. But I always ask people, do you see 421,000 children walking on the streets of America? So if you don't, then the question is, where are they? So the transportation model, the logistics of moving commodities, in fact, this could be children for sex slavery or pornography or whatever, is so organized and so sophisticated now that we're not even stopping it. So the question remains for law enforcement, if you can't determine what the routes are for child trafficking, then what else could be trafficked? Could nuclear weapons be trafficked? Can drugs be trafficked? Can weapons be trafficked? These are the hard questions that I think DOJ and people and local law enforcement need to really focus in on, because we have a national security issue here. And the fact that we don't even know, we can't even stop the trafficking of children, so to speak. So there's all these different tiers, these levels. You know, there's the guy in the local town that, you know, grabs a kid and probably keeps the kid in the basement for his own pleasure or her own pleasure or whatever it may be. And then there's the people that may collect more children and sell them to different gangs. And then there's the children that get absconded and then they're sold overseas. And then there's the elite that basically can take kids on their airplane. I mean, there's a whole, the mechanism is pretty big. And it's very sophisticated. And this is why I tell a lot of my colleagues, and no disrespect for anybody that goes overseas to rescue kids at all, because it's just tough and it's dangerous. But we have a bad problem in our own backyard here, a big problem. And I say 60% of the NGOs that claim to be doing awareness or claim to be going and getting kids aren't. What they're doing is they've created these great business models with great government grants and they pay great salaries. That's about 60%. That leaves about 40% of people that are trying to do the right thing. But a lot of those organizations are falling on their sword because they're aware, but they're not equipped. They don't really know how to run an operation in the United States. Now, if I go overseas to any third world country, I can pay somebody $200 and say, why don't you find me 20 kids that are being trafficked? And you know what? Give them a day or so. They'll find 20 kids for you. And you can take your camera and you can film your rescue. And then when you leave there, the question is, where do the kids go? Well, they don't go to aftercare most of the time. Most of the time they go back to the traffickers, right? Wow. So I tell people, here's the challenge. You want to deal with the toughest of the toughest. Start rescuing children here in the United States that are being trafficked every single day by pimps and all kinds of stuff, and understand the AO here, the area of operation. And I'll tell you something, it is not easy. It's very sophisticated. And in addition to that, Richard, add corruption to the top of that. At the highest levels of our government, all the way down to the lowest levels of local government, it doesn't matter if there's doctors, preachers, law enforcement, teachers, the local taco stand, almost every area of society, you're going to find some trafficking of children. You know, no one gets a free meal pass out of this one, so to speak.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, we saw that with the whole Epstein thing, and you know how there was a lot of inferred relationships that so far we don't maybe have all the evidence, but it seems he had a lot of high-powered people that both were involved in covering it up. So if that's the case, how many more Epsteins are out there, and how big is this web?
Well, I can tell you without disclosing a number of things, it's very big. I can also tell you that there is corruption within foster care systems and CPS systems where children go missing, but there are alliances between people in the CPS system and the foster care system that sell to predators. So predators can have their way and dispose of the children. Internally, that mechanism that we're supposed to trust, it's got its bad points too. Now that doesn't mean everybody across the United States. But what I am saying is, if you're going to get into this, you need to be aware that this is pretty much Fort Apache. As an NGO that's rescuing children, you're surrounded by bad guys, and you've got to constantly be vetting everybody that knocks on your door, so to speak, even other NGOs, because the challenge you have is that NGOs that are competing for grant money will do whatever they can to ruin other NGOs. It's weird. It's like, get a grip. We're all in this together. There's enough to go around. Why would you even be that way? But they are. So this is interesting enough. This is one of the reasons why we've never taken grant money, and we never will. I don't want that competition, number one. And number two, I don't want the US government telling me what I can and cannot do because I took money to run my operations.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you question some of the motivations. While most of them probably have good motivations, you know, if they're able to or willing to kind of compete, if you will, with others that are doing the same thing rather than cooperate for the cause, it kind of puts a little shade on it. But
It
I remember
does. It's one of,
sorry.
no, go ahead, Richard.
I was just going to say, to your point about the child services and foster, I read an article that the data was a little old. I think it was 2009, and they were speaking specifically about New York City. That the numbers they say are almost impossible to pin down, but they said 2,000 boys and girls are actively involved in child prostitution, and the average age that they're turned out onto the street is, I think it was 15.8, which is just gut wrenching to hear.
Yeah, we've gotten kids we've saved. They were trafficked as early as 5 years old. I'm talking about business trafficked by their parents. Not that they got lost on the street, So we've heard some pretty horrendous stories, testimonies, so to speak. And we've done our research, and no reason for us to believe that it isn't true. And we try to pay really close attention to that. But you would think, Richard, that as people do become aware of this, you would think, wow, this is our most precious asset, children in America. And yet, what do we see people doing? We see people, a divided nation, on the stupidest stuff, like racism. There's no racism here. They can try to, the diversity thing, not trying to be political. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of in my life. It's right out of the communist playbook. You start pointing out people's differences, and people look at people's differences. How about unity? What it is, divided we stand, united we stand, divided we fall, and most of the people, never even thought a second thing about some of this stuff until it got put up in their face. It's like, oh, well, I'll think about that. I have friends that work with us with ARC, and they'll be the first ones to tell you. And they're our heritage, I'm a mixed breed, we're like some Americans,
Like
and I've
most
got a buddy of
Americans,
mine.
right?
Yeah, like most Americans. And he goes, I'm not an African American. He goes, I wasn't born in Africa. He goes, I may be Black and I'm an American, so you can refer to me as a Black American. He goes, he said, but you can even drop the Black part and just call me an American. And I said, yeah, I don't think we've ever added anything into it other than being an American. And for anybody that thinks differently, just go down range with us when we're dragging our buddies out of the trenches. We all bleed the same color. if that's what you want to make about it. So it's interesting what's happening. And here's what I tell people. I'm watching all this BLM stuff about slavery. I had a buddy of mine, not he wasn't a buddy of mine, he was actually leading one of those um, BLM protests. And his name was Julius. And I said, Julius, I said, you ever pick cotton? And he goes, no. And I said, and I never owned a slave. So what's the problem? I said, over 150 years ago, we put this to rest. And so what I'm watching is people try to talk about something that doesn't exist. And then I look at all of them and I say, you want slavery? You really want to talk about slavery and you want to stop it? How about all the children that are in slavery in the United States? And you guys don't want to do a thing about it except for go out and burn buildings down and whine about when you were in slavery. You weren't in slavery. Your parents probably weren't in slavery. Everybody in this country, if you come from every person in the United States, if you want to look all the way back at their heritage, their relatives have been enslaved somewhere. Look, the Israelis were enslaved by the Egyptians. Americans were enslaved by the Arabs. The Arabs have enslaved, people, all through history, people, indentured servants here in America, Irish people, enslaved basically, and the list goes on and on and on. And yet we're trying to create problems based off something that doesn't exist. But what does exist is this: every kid of every color that I have ever rescued in the United States has been enslaved. And people aren't doing anything about it except for the NGOs. All these people that are out protesting, you're a bunch of hypocrites. If you really cared about slavery, you'd get on board with the NGOs that are out there trying to get kids out of slavery, trying to get women out of slavery, out of human slavery and human trafficking. But do you think they will? No, because that's part of a whole different agenda, So I got on a little rant there, Richard. Sorry about it, but it's the way it is.
Well, to extract something out of, what you were saying is that just a personal belief is that anytime that you try to segment people, let's say it's America, you segment them into these different groups, unity is the casualty. And
exactly.
And, I think the military example of that is, there's no racism in a foxhole. If you're all in it together with good intentions, and being honest about the issues, which there are issues. There's no doubt about there are issues and there are racists, but, if we try to say that everybody's a racist, then it doesn't allow any room for grace and conversation. And so, my viewers are sick of me using this term, but it's one of my foundational principles is the idea of imago Dei, that we're all born in the image of God. And if we truly, truly believe that, it just changes the way we look at one another and how we have to treat each other. We're compelled by our belief, in God, that we're all in this together, and let's try to figure it out together, and let's not divide one another. Let's I don't want to sound too kumbaya, but unity is the only way you're going to get through this kind of stuff. And you break it down and create adversaries where maybe they don't exist.
You do. It's funny. I've never seen anybody be able to legislate morality, evil, or earthquakes. You just can't do it. And just because you create a law that says, don't say this to someone or do say this, it's not going to stop it from happening. We got so many stupid laws on the books. We think because we put a law in place or we write something on a paper that everybody's going to abide by or listen to it. And people are human. And I don't care what color you are. I don't care where you come from. You got good people and you got bad people. You got nice people and you got ugly people. And it's always going to be that way. And, if for anybody to say, well, you don't know what it's like to be discriminated against, excuse me, you don't know my life. You don't know where I was raised. You don't know what countries I've been into before. So they have no idea, but they make assumptions. And I think that, if we were going to have a call to action, at least from where I am now, I would say, you know what, we need to unify. And we do need to remember that principle that we were created in the image of God. And the problem is that people have forgotten God, so to speak. And so guess what? They're not beholden to him. So they're just looking at their own selves. And let's take a look at that. People looking at their own selves instead of kind of doing what God wants to do. How's that working out for everybody?
Well,
Not too good.
one of the tragic statistics that I keep coming over when it comes to human trafficking is that it's disproportionately people of color. And, as I talk with Robin Gauthier about that, oftentimes children that find themselves in the foster care system or what have you, or in situations of family instability, are the most vulnerable to being trafficked. And
Yeah,
so, when it comes to addressing the issue, we have to address that instability, and then we go back to what we were talking about with, some of the things that are part of the failings of the foster system, and the other government entities that are responsible for children.
yeah.
But I think, to your point, we just have to be honest about it too.
Well, we do, if we look at the statistics, and statistics change all the time, but the most recent ones that we looked at, 75% of the traffickers in the United States are Black. Okay. 65% of the buyers are white. So nobody's getting away
There's
from it.
no clean hands.
There's no clean hands at all. And so I think it's one of the, one of the things that kind of irks me a little bit when I look at things like Black Lives Matter. It's a Marxist organization. If you read its manifesto, it wants to destroy the Constitution. It wants to destroy the family unit. And one of the problems we're having right now is the family unit. We don't have fathers and mothers holding families together. So guess what happens to their kids? They go to foster care. They run away, whatever it may be.
And that's not a racial issue. That's across
the board.
Yeah.
So why would we want to destroy that? Why wouldn't we want to patch that up? Why wouldn't we want to make that happen? It's interesting. I think, when you look at the socialist movement in the United States, and I look at Black Lives Matter, they were so smart at creating their name that if you say, I don't like Black Lives Matter, meaning the organization, what people hear is Black lives don't matter. They were brilliant about this. And that's not what you're saying at all. Actually, I'm a veteran. Guess what? Every life matters. Black, green, red, whatever, they all matter. I mean, these are people that I've bled with, all creeds, all colors across the board. But that organization is exactly what it says it is. It's a Marxist organization, and and people got to wake up, and it's pushing things that are not constitutional, and yet people aren't smart enough to read into that and say, wait a minute, what's really happening? Who's being used? It's like people were talking about Antifa as an idea. Oh, really? Yeah. Antifa's more than just an idea. Trust me. I mean, one of the latest reports I got from a former CIA officer talked about Antifa's assassination program that they're trying to roll out, So I think that, and we got a little off topic here, but I think, if I were to look at Americans, and I don't care what color you are, and I would say, you want to unify the nation, get together and start saving children, our American children that are being enslaved, that are being trafficked, that are being child pornography. Get involved, get yourself equipped, so you know what you're doing. Just don't stand by and let it happen. I mean, that's if what you're saying is you really care, but Richard, I think that, it's always been the few, it's like we say in the Marine Corps, the few, the proud, the brave, the few, the proud, the Marines, whatever. I tell
Come
people,
on, you're a Marine. You got to get that one right.
Yeah, I got to get that one out. Yeah. But, I tell people we don't teach our strike force recovery team to be safe. We teach them to be brave, and bravery is important, and there's nothing safe. There's nothing safe about getting in your car and driving down the highway. Certainly nothing safe about rescuing kids. And now that the cartel is involved, and MS-13, the Bloods and the Crips, the Gershons, and other uh, gangs are involved, it makes it even more dangerous. And so it's important that if you're going to go out and rescue children, you equip yourself so that you can survive that. Simple things like running an SDR, no footprint contamination, so you don't have MS-13 show up on your doorstep, so to speak. But we live in some really wacky times. And I honestly, Richard, we're at a time where good is seen as evil and evil is seen as good. And I think biblically, it speaks about that. And we're at that time where I don't really think people care. I don't think they want to hear. I don't think they want to listen. I think they want to stay right here in their iPad or their phone. And they live in a whole different world. But with that said, I think that the opposition, whatever the opposition may be in our country, highly underestimated the patriots of this country, 70 million of them. And those patriots play hardball. And I think we're getting to a tipping point in our country on all fronts, where that when the rule of law is no longer, I think there's going to be some drastic movements across the United States. And it's not going to be like anything anybody else has seen. You and I and others have been in civil war. We've seen it. It's destructive. It's not pretty. It's loss of life, and we don't want it to happen. But as I just sit back from 14,000 feet and watch it all unfold, it seems more and more like we're pushing to the edge that one day that could possibly happen. People are fed up with the orchestration of the COVID thing. People are fed up with the stupid mask stuff. People are fed up with the lying, and people are fed up certainly with this administration and other things, So it's going to be really interesting. So in the midst of all of that, here's what I would say. As all of that's falling apart around us, let us not forget that we have children out here. They're American children, and they're innocent across the board. And so let us not focus too much on all of this destruction around us, but let us focus more on the lives that we can save. Doesn't matter what color they are, doesn't matter how old they are, 18 and below, if they're children. Let's go out and save them, because that's the future of our country. One day, you and I won't be here. Who do we leave the country to? And that's the way our fathers and our grandparents thought. What do I leave to my children as far as this great nation and the Constitution and the blood that our forefathers spilled to make sure that we could have this as well. So,
yeah, while I don't know who are my viewers, I'm sure that some will agree with you and some will not. But I think the important thing is the focus you gave to kind of a call for unity in a, specifically on children. Because, to go back to your previous stat, if there are over 400,000 children that are simply missing, if that's not something we could all get behind trying to either resolve, looking at the 400, but, looking at, well, what do we do to prevent more? And,
right.
You look at some of the rhetoric, when it was, talking about MS-13 and, to me, it was obvious, this was a criminal organization, but there were those that wanted to defend their rights. And I'm like, well, of course we defend rights in America, but they also have to be, rounded up as the criminals that they are. I mean, because they were cutting people's heads off and enslaving girls and doing things that are just not found in America, or shouldn't be, at least.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I think your call to action over, especially, all these young kids, it's something we have to, and that's something that, again, my previous interview we touched on, is that within COVID, she said that the statistics of familial trafficking
It
has
increased.
gone, up significantly, which is, to me, it's heart wrenching. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
not to get into story time, but to make kind of the point that it's, both these big gangs and organizations but you told a story on an interview that I saw. I was hoping maybe you could repeat about the recovery that you had in Switzerland,
Mm.
if you remember that one.
Yeah, we remember that one real well.
If you could share that, I think that
Mm.
was, shows that it could also be, to my previous point, familial.
Yeah, this was a non-custodial parental abduction. A father had a father and his mother, which would be the grandmother of the children, had actually kidnapped those two little boys and had taken them all over the world, and we ended up locating them in Switzerland at that time. I don't think that he had any intentions of trafficking those two little boys, but he certainly appeared to leverage them, and the fact that he had them while he was running great scams and taking money from a lot of people. And we were able to catch up with them in Switzerland and get the boys. Do you want the whole story, the miracles included, or just the fact that we, you know? But it was one of these things where
Whatever you want to share.
it was quite a number of miraculous things taking place, and that we were able to locate them in Interlaken, and along with the Swiss police, who were very, very good friends. Actually, we went in and rescued the two boys. The father was not there at the time, and we took them from Switzerland and went to France, to the embassy there, because we just wanted to kind of get out of the AO a little bit, and our flights were going to be out of that area as well. So it's really funny that as we got to the American embassy, we were explaining that the kids have been abducted, and had the mom there, and the consular officer, wonderful, wonderful lady. She probably heard a million kidnapping stories, and she was trying to figure out the paperwork and stuff. And so I don't think she was really believing the story at first. And so talk about miracles happening. I remember sitting there, I'm trying to figure out, great, last thing we need is not getting some assistance from the American embassy. And this other lady walks in and goes up to get a passport. And the consular officer says, well, Mrs. So-and-so, this is the fourth time you've lost your passport here in Paris. And she said, no. She goes, it's been stolen. There were pickpockets all over the place, right? And the mother of the two children is sitting next to me, and she goes, oh my gosh, she goes, that was my neighbor in San Francisco. Chad stole $60,000 from her and her husband, or something like that, right? So we walk up, and they introduce, and now the consular is listening to this whole thing, and the lady that was getting the passports goes, her story's true. Her ex-husband stole $60,000 from us, blah 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 blah. So anyway, it just kind of corroborated the story, and we were able to get out of there. It's funny, what's really funny is the consular said, everybody's looking for you guys. And I said, well, we haven't done anything illegal. She said, well, we know that, but they're trying to resolve this in Switzerland. And I said, well, this is an American. And she said, well, she goes, take my card. She goes, because you're probably not going to get out of the country, meaning France. So we get to the airport, and we're standing there at this airline called Extra Large Airlines. I've never heard of them before. X Large Airlines. So anyway, I'm standing there, and I'm just
Never heard of that
and
one.
I think, yeah, I never heard of that too. It looked like something that came out of like Abu Dhabi or I don't know, someplace. But I'm sitting there, and most people who know me know I'm a man of faith, unashamedly. I mean, look, God doesn't need your belief or disbelief in order to exist. And I'm not much of a gambler, so it doesn't hurt me to believe. So I'm sitting there and said, well, Lord, I don't know how we're going to get out of this one. And the people behind the extra large airline counter, they punch the button to punch out the tickets, and all 4 tickets come out blank. And all of a sudden I hear a voice in my head says, "I will make you invisible." And my buddy's standing behind me, and I said, "What?" And he just looks at me, he goes, "What do you mean, what?" I said, "What did you just say?" He goes, "I didn't say anything." I said, "Did you just say, I'll make you invisible?" And he just looks at me like I'm crazy. He goes, "No." So because the tickets were in blank, right? So the guy behind the counter goes, "This is strange. We've never ever had this happen before." And so he does some corrections with the machine, and he punches it again. And guess what? 4 tickets come out, right? Or 5 tickets come out, and they're all good. So we get our tickets, and we're moving to customs. And this is, of course, where if anything is going to be snafu, it's going to be there. The mother, the child, and myself are in one line, and Rudy's in the other line up there. And we walk up to the customs guy, and it's like, you know that scene out of Star Wars where Obi-Wan Kenobi looks at the stormtroopers and goes, "You shall not see me, we shall not see you. We shall pass by, you shall
These are not
pass
the
by." It
droids you
was
were looking
just like
for.
it was just like that. The guy doesn't even look up. He looks at the passports, he stamps them, and then just hands them and never looks up. Now down on the other counter, Rudy's got another customs agent, and this girl keeps swiping his passport, and something is not working. She just keeps swiping it, and she's shaking. And finally, she just gives him the passport and says, "You can go." We go, we get on the plane, we come back to the United States.
Wow.
It's the most bizarre thing. It was really interesting. Divine intervention, somebody may say it was luck, who knows what, but the circumstances were perfect for us at that time, and I'm grateful. And
Yeah.
so you're right, when you refer to the fact that we run some pretty tight operations, but I need the world to know that at the end, all of our options get taken away. And I end up getting on my knees and going, "Okay, I need a Red Sea opening here. These are your kids. We came here to get them. Would you help us out?" And you know what, Richard? Every single time, something miraculous happens for us. Don't know what that means. All I know is when I got into rescuing kids, I didn't do it because it was a job. I got into it because it was a calling. And once you have something tug on your heart like that, or once you rescue one child, your life changes. I mean, drastically. And unless you're the son of Satan, so to speak, you can't help but your heart be softened, and you figure out, man, you know what? If I don't do this, who will? Because we live in a world where everybody else thinks that somebody else is going to do it. And you know what? That's not true. So,
Yeah. I think I think you touched on it earlier that we put a lot of faith in government to solve the ills of society. And I think oftentimes probably it's personal gain and self-focus on the part of politicians that problems don't get addressed or solved. It's all about getting reelected and staying in power, and those things just become hurdles that leave a wake of disaster behind them. And you
yeah.
know the reason this whole subject kind of came to my radar, because I think luckily there's a lot of people in America that this doesn't touch, and so if it doesn't, then maybe it's not something that they even think about. And that's the tragedy, is what's happening when you're not looking. But a friend of a friend, I happened to be over at their house, and a call came in from this my friend's wife's friend, and her daughter went missing. And as the story goes, they found her in a local motel, and she was being,
Mm,
you know, drugged up, and they were doing everything they could to turn her against her mom, and indoctrinate her. And
mm,
I just, as many of us have blinders on, I did. And that really was a wake up call to me, that there's a lot going on that I'm not aware of. And, you hear about prostitution and all that, but you don't hear, how it happens. And, so that kind of piqued my interest, like, what don't I know and what do I need to know? So that led to a couple of these conversations, including today's. And so, thank you for educating us. I think it's a topic that America needs to hear about, as uncomfortable as that is.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Well, it's sad that it's out there. I wish it wasn't, but it is. And we can turn a blind eye to it for only so long. And most of the time, people do until it happens to them, like your friend. And then they call out people like ourselves to go get them. And the problem with our government is, and I think people, it's broken. The system's broken, and our country's broken. And so you you can't expect government to do this. It says we the people, and we the people have to do something about this. And we the people have to do a lot of things. But and I know not everybody can get involved. Look, the single mom that's got 3 kids and she's working 14 hours a day, she can't do this. We get it. There's a lot of people, and there's a lot going on, where people can't. But I would encourage people that if you can, it's a worthy cause, probably more rewarding to the soul than anything you'll ever do. Look, running the Boy Scouts is great. We need it. Same thing with the Girl Scouts. We need that. We need charities. We need all these things. We all need to work in unison for all of these things. And this is not everybody's cut out for this. But if you are cut out for it, then get involved, get equipped. It's like we offer that 5-day equipping course. So
Yeah, I was
people
going
can
to ask
start
you
it.
to
Yeah.
talk about that, because I found that interesting. I wanted to know, who do you invite to even be a part of that?
Yeah, well, advanced learners, so to speak. Last course, we had 75 people, federal marshals, local state law enforcement, NGOs, some traffic victims, there's survivors, and some churches and some townspeople, and people flew in from all over the state. So we had a really good turnout, and actually that was in South Dakota, and they're actually running operations as we speak right now. So what we realized, Richard, was there's a lot of organizations out there teaching awareness, but awareness doesn't bring a kid home. A child doesn't come home until there's boots on the ground and you physically bring that child home. And so that means you've got to be equipped to do it. You've got to know how to run an operation. And so what we offer on those 5 days, which we're going to expand to 6 here pretty soon, very intense, sometimes 10, 11, 12 hours a day, is equipping. Like the little bit of tradecraft we can offer so that you can stay safe. How do you start an organization? How do you really put an operation together? And how do you successfully coordinate an operation to bring a kid home? And that's what people need. I get calls all the time, even from tier 1 operators saying, hey, I want to come help ARC. And what we tell them is, look, come to the equipping course and understand the AO, the area of operation. Just because you've been in Iraq or Afghanistan, or just because you've been a law enforcement officer, doesn't mean you understand the area of operation when it comes to trafficking. So we equip them, we teach that. And it's we not only screen, we vet everyone. We run background investigations, because we had a couple of provocations, bad guys wanting to sneak in and find out what we're doing. And we have people sign NDAs as well, because we teach some pretty slick stuff.
And I'm sure there are people that have good intentions that, for one reason or another, are just not equipped to be there as well.
There are that, and there are some people that come, and after they finish the course, they go, "This is not for me." They just go, wow, this is more than I ever realized. I never knew it was this big, or I never knew that this was what it really took to go save a kid, So we have that happen as well. So, but it's pretty successful. Kevin Malone, who was on President Trump's White House Human Trafficking Task Force, was kind enough to look at the program and made the statement that it's probably one of the best in the United States that he's seen. We get great reviews, and that's only to say that, while we would like to be doing nothing but operations 24/7, which we do a lot of, if we don't start building an army of people, and equipping people, we're never going to get all the kids that we can get. I wish I wish I had 3,000 people, you know, and hundreds of operators to just send out and do the job that we think that all of our law enforcement can do. But the reality of it is our law enforcement associates they're overburdened. They're not paid well.
Right.
They're asked to do things that only Superman can do most of the time. And on top of defunding them, you know, we want to blame them sometimes for what they're not doing. And look, for every time a police officer has to go, you know, go out to one call, that's 3 hours, 4 hours of paperwork after that. And the guy never gets to see his family. So, you know, my hat's off to the really good law enforcement officers of our country. They do an amazing job across the board, and I don't think they're appreciated. I think they're targeted right now. And yeah, are there some law enforcement officers that have made some mistakes? Yeah, guess what? There's some politicians that have made some mistakes. There's some the pastors that have made mistakes. People make mistakes.
There's good, inept, and bad
All
people in every profession, and
every profession.
And there's not a person in this country that I know of that doesn't want to root out the bad seeds. It's just, that's a scarecrow argument. You know, the one thing that has come out of this defund the police topic, which I think is, for me, the one that stands out as the most valid, is that the police are being asked to do things that are really not law enforcement. You know, oftentimes they're being put in the middle of domestic squabbles and things that, you know, are more social work than law enforcement. And I think that needs to be addressed, certainly. But I don't think the, you know, wholesale taking, you know, like New York taking $1 billion out of the NYPD budget and then going to some unaccountable, you know, social work area is the answer. I think there's somewhere in between, but accountability obviously has to be there.
Yeah, it does. Well, look at the stupidity, and I say this openly, of the Portland mayor who marched with Antifa, who did all that stuff, and now guess what? They're after Antifa's after him, and after defunding the police, now he wants the police back. You know, like hypocrisy. It's like stupidity. It's like, you know what? I'm going to tell you something. I got asked to run for the governor of Colorado recently. And I remember it by some people out of Washington. And I said, I'm not a politician. And they went, we don't want politicians. We want leaders.
Yeah.
And I thought about that. And I said, you know what? These guys are onto something. I don't ever want to be a politician. No. And we've got politicians who are politicians and they're not leaders. They suck at leadership. But they pay the price. They do whatever they want. They get in place. They compromise. And guess what? And we get seeing the same thing over and over and over again. And the nation needs good, strong leaders now, you know. And so people need to step up to the plate and say, you know what? I'm not a politician. I'm a leader. And this is what we're going to do. Yeah. We're not defunding our police. If you're a criminal and you do this, this is what you're going to get. If you sexually exploit a child, you're getting the death penalty. Every kid in my state is going to be like safe here. And if you do this and this and this, you lose your rights as a citizen, you know, in our state.
I mean, the unfortunate thing is that the people that are most detrimentally affected are people of color and low income, because the police are extracted from their neighborhoods. And that's where, unfortunately, there's a lot of violence that only increases with the lack of presence of the police force.
Yeah, exactly. So this is stuff, you know, we've seen it going on for years and years and years. And this is why community is so important, and accountability. You know, if we're talking about things running rampant, particularly with the defunding of police, we're starting to see more child trafficking, because people are calling going, somebody grabbed my kid. Police can't respond to it. Guess what? Because they're not there. You know, because you defunded them. And so we're seeing more online trafficking and on and on and on. And this is why the communities have got to get together and start demanding accountability. I had, over the course of a number of years, and this is not a controversial statement at all. It is what it is. I wanted to find out how could we really move the needle to some degree? Because people are telling me all the time, well, I want to move the needle. It's like, okay, you rescue one child, you've moved the needle. Now let's force multiply who we are, and guess what? We'll go get more kids. But there is one other option, and it's actually very simple. Every single incarcerated predator that I have spoken with or interviewed, every single one, I've asked the same question. What is the one thing that would have deterred you from molesting that little kid? Richard, every single one said, well, you know what? If I thought I was going to get the death penalty, I probably wouldn't have done it. I would have thought twice. But as it is now, I'm in for 7. I'll be out in 4, whatever it may be, right? So what I've learned from that is this. Our penalty for sexually exploiting children isn't tough enough. Now, some people will go, you're talking about the death penalty. Well, let me ask you this. How do you murder a child without killing them? You
Right.
sexually exploit them, and
Yeah.
they die every single day for the rest of their life. It is better that you would have had a homicide, that life's kid taken off the earth, than for them to suffer their entire life. So when we have a society that has no respect for birth in itself, and we're just all about let's abort every kid. We have no value on life itself. How can we expect that society to even care about a 5-year-old that's being molested, or a 7-year-old that's being raped every single day and drugged? How can we actually expect society to care? They don't. They don't. So for we who do, that are the people that are the pillars of society, so to speak, we're holding up this roof, so to speak, so it doesn't come crashing down on everybody, because you know the result. Once it comes crashing down and all the people start screaming about how it fell apart, they want to start blaming people and pointing fingers and going, how come you let the roof fall down? It's like, well, how come you didn't help hold it up? So what we're learning is that, and I would do this if I were governor of Colorado, it's one of the very first things I do. I put the death penalty in place for anybody sexually exploited a child. And I sent a message around the world that said, guess what? Every child that lives in Colorado will be safe. And if you come here and you touch one of my children, guess what? You just lost your life. That's it. Now, I'd be soft on other things, but that one thing right there, because it sends a message and it says, this is how valuable and how precious our children are to us. This is the future of my state. This is the future of our country. And until we start sending that message, guess what? Predators are going to continue to take advantage of kids every single day. And what's the sad thing about it is, and I've had this happen, I remember having this conversation years ago with a lady who adamantly opposed what I was saying until her 8-year-old daughter got abducted, got raped, and was found dead. You know what? I went to her and I said, what do you think? You think we should let they caught the guy. And I said, what do you think? You think we should let that guy go? You know what she said? No, you should get the death sentence right out the bat. Because guess what? It's her child now.
I I think there are a lot of people that simply oppose the death penalty, period. But when I talk to people, just in regular conversation, you get the feeling that there's pretty much universal agreement that murder and child molestation are kind of like the two things that people are like, those are like a whole different category. And like there's a lot of agreement about how severe those are and that those need to be handled, and put rape up there. Those three,
Yeah.
people just have a visceral reaction to. It's not like arguing over smoking pot. It's those
Yeah.
three. And then it seems like with child molestation, I mean, I don't know the details, but you hear that there's a lot of jailhouse justice that goes on for, there seems to be, a child molester goes into prison. They don't last very long, it sounds like.
I've heard that. I've heard that. I haven't been inside to see it happen or not, but I will tell you that one of the things we're looking at now, it's on the books, is legislators are trying to do a couple of things: lower the age of consent, and they're trying to say that pedophilia and the LGBTQXYZ is doing the same thing, because I had the conversations with them, trying to say that it's a sexual preference. It's a gender related issue, that a pedophile or predator likes a child, and it should no longer be considered a crime, but it's a condition. And a lot of legislators in high places, even in Washington, are pushing for that law as well, because they know that they've been poking little kids. And if they get caught, they don't want to go to prison. So they're just trying to milk it down slowly. And when it first started happening years ago, they pushed it every year.
Right.
People would go, that'll never pass. That'll never pass. But guess what? We've gradually started carving things out to the point that people are accepting it. I've even had conversations, and it would sicken you, with people when I was doing some undercover work. And the conversation was predators having their way with children. And a couple of guys like, there's nothing wrong with that. I could smash a 3-year-old, and in my head, I'm listening to this thing and I'm going, you got to be kidding me. This is the type of people we have.
Yeah.
So
it used to be universally accepted that no, it's not a lifestyle and it's not a proclivity. It's
a crime.
It's a mental disease and needs to be, nipped in the bud, whatever that means legally. But
yeah,
no.
I had a lady, Richard, you'll appreciate this. She's a psychologist at one of my speaking engagements, and she was sitting on the front row. I can see her face now. And she said, Mr. Baz, she goes, don't you think that we should look at the psychological, or she say psychological aspects of this, and try to figure out why predators do what they do to children, and maybe we might be able to bring them around. And I remember looking at her and said, ma'am, let me explain something to you. I don't need to know why a predator rapes a child. It's wrong. That's it. It's evil and it's wrong. I don't need to know why he did it. What I know is he did it and it's wrong. And that's all that matters to me. And that's the fact. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze somebody. The real reality is there's a law, and there's a moral law that says you don't touch children. Keep your hands off of them. That's it. I mean, and we have to protect that.
I would never try to stop a academic or a professional like a psychologist or psychiatrist from trying to figure that out. But in the meantime, they're criminals, period. And they need to be dealt with as criminals. And,
right.
and you can, like Charles Manson was in prison for most of his life. They could study him all they want, but he's not coming out, period. I think he's dead now, but yeah. But, the whole topic, I think, what is so disturbing is that it's the topic kind of that nobody likes to talk about because it's not pleasant, be that, child molestation, rape, child porn, which is all kind of the end result of the trafficking in many cases. And I think that's why sometimes these unpleasant things don't make, conversation at cocktail parties. Therefore, they're avoided. And, people may not want to watch this video because it makes them uncomfortable, but that can't stop me from trying to have people like yourself talk about something that's this important. So, I just so appreciate you spending some time with us and talking about this uncomfortable topic.
You're more than welcome, Richard. Hopefully people will learn from your show, and hopefully people will want to get involved and not look the other way. But you know what? Even if they don't, Richard, guys like you and me and a lot of other people out there, we're going to keep doing this, saving kids, whether anybody else gets on board or not. If we're the only organization left in the United States that goes and saves kids, well, we're going to be the only one, and that's fine with us. We're going to keep doing it. And hopefully our strategic partners like CERT and Shared Hope International and other people are of the mindset that it doesn't matter if anybody else does it, we're going to still do it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and there's a lot of children's lives that will be saved as a result. So you're doing God's work in saving children because, as these numbers are so astronomical, the detrimental effects to them later in life, and to society, because they have siblings, they may have children, they have relationships, it's exponential. And
Yeah.
so, the more we can do to prevent it and save, and then aftercare, as you touched on, it's also important, and needs to be.
Huge. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, aftercare is huge. We don't do it. We know it well. My hat's off to people that do great aftercare, because this is where the healing takes place, and it takes a long time. I tell your listeners out there, if you can get in the field with us, get in the field with us. If you can't, financially support us or support an organization that you're knowing is doing a good job. Make sure you vet them to know where your money's going. It's our goal. You know what? One day I hope we right now I consider us to be one of the most effective NGOs out there doing this. There are others doing a great job. Uh, and we don't necessarily have to be the biggest, but one day we want to increase our numbers so that we basically take over this role and do what DOJ can't do. Or, so one day law enforcement goes, hey, we're sending all our cases to you. And because this is all we do, this is all we do. So hopefully those listening will get on board with us with their prayers and their finances. And even some will come to the course and say, hey, guess what? Show me how to start my own organization. Let's get out there and save some kids' lives.
It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, buddy. God bless you. And give a call anytime, okay? For however
Okay.
we can be of service to you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Richard. Take care
Thank you.
now.
God
All right.
bless.